Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. February 6th, 2024, Ottawa County Planning and Policy Committee. First item on our agenda this morning is public comment. Please approach the podium, state your name and where you're from, and 3 minutes for public comment. Do we have any takers? Going twice? Okay, let's get into it. First item would be the approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and support. Any feedback? Any questions, concerns? All good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Second item is the approval of the minutes from the January 9th, 2024 Planning and Policy Committee meeting. Is there a motion of support? Or approval?
I'll make the motion to approve them.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, second. Any comments? Corrections? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the January 9th minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion passes. So that takes us to our first items of action. We have two items here coming from the Ottawa County Parks Commission, and we have Aaron Botble, is that how I say your name? Yeah. Botbile, okay. Why don't you come on up, Aaron, and take us through. I do have a couple just, high level feedback. This has got to be the thickest packet I've seen for two agenda items in county history.
Can I make
Yeah.
that motion to get us started?
Yes, yep.
I'll make the motion to accept the bid from McCormick Sand Incorporated for the Ottawa Sands Lake Loop construction to get this going.
I'll second that.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. Take it away, Aaron.
Yeah, I guess bathrooms just have a lot of specs, and so so if you want to read about bathroom specs, this is your packet. So I'll just talk there. These projects are pretty tied together, so I'll just cover them both before you vote on them. With our Ottawa Sands master plan, we had two main goals: access and enhancing access and enhancing the ecology of the site because it was a former sand mine. So while everybody's pretty aware of the item Explorers Camp, which we got a large donation and to move forward with it. These two projects were really our first priority of the master plan. The lake, the mining lake that's there is 80 acres. It has almost, when we purchased the park, it was almost ready to go as a trail, but it's very challenging for anybody that has young kids, mobility issues. And it's a great scenic trail that should be open to everyone. So that's the one part, the lake loop. Once we got the donation, we started looking for other funding. So these projects are both funded by two different grants that are kind of tied together from the state and federal government that you previously approved. So to complement the park right now is fairly busy, but not as busy as it could be. We anticipate once we had the lake loop in and all the other improvements and we open it, that parking lot right when you come into the park will be very busy. And so to go with the trail, we wanted a modern restroom there. And this restroom will be heated. I'll have, two men's and women's and family restroom. And we'll also, this will be our first park based on feedback from the Disability Network to have an adult changing station. So if that's a feedback we got this, we'll hopefully start doing that for our parks because there's groups that come to our parks and bring like, a bus full of people with challenges and they need the restroom. And so that was surprising feedback, but this is, we're happy to do that. So these projects came pretty close to budget. We were very happy with the Lake Loop bid, and we were able to do a 10-foot concrete pathway, which was our ideal for this because it's just easier to manage in this very sandy soil. Other than that, I think that kind of covers it. I'll take any questions.
All right, any questions for Aaron?
Just a comment. So I've really appreciated, Aaron, all the work that's been done to keep most of the Ottawa Sands natural, yet helping more people to be able to appreciate the beauty that's there and I know I've walked around it when it's just been sand and it is a hard walk. And I think it's going to be a really great asset to more people by adding the concrete trail. I think we talked about it in parks. Do you recall how long the concrete will, like, what is the projected, how long it would last without minor repairs and
Oh, yeah.
or with that in mind?
I think concrete's something like a 30, maybe Roger would know this as well as I, like a 30-year asset, ideally. And it lasts longer than asphalt for sure. And then, yeah, as you see with most beach parks, concrete is preferred because it's so easy to repair. The other thing I'll mention for what you said, Allison, yes, we're trying to keep in the aesthetic experience of Ottawa County, of Ottawa Sands, intact as much as possible, but we did get 8 million in funding from the trust fund to put this in place. So it's not, it just can't be, it has to be open to much more people for the, we owe that to, based on the investment we got.
Anyone else? Just a comment, Aaron, that, yeah, I appreciate, the adult changing, station. I think, having a lot of years in Ottawa County, I've heard other people say this, that our parks are like almost national park level quality, and amenities like this is one of those things that really helps us maintain that reputation. So just a thank you for all of that thoughtfulness and these designs.
Yep, appreciate that. We're trying to make it an enjoyable experience for anybody that comes and accessible to all. And yeah, one thing I can say about the modern restrooms is that we know that our parks that have them are more popular than, it seems obvious, but it makes a huge difference. We're hoping to do one at Upper Macatawa. Naturally, in the future, we're going to be coming to you with another grant to try again. We didn't get funding this time around because we think that park should be maybe busier than it is, and that's a barrier to some people. Again, young families or people that like just need to go, and take a hike and hit the restroom.
Sure. Okay, Roger.
So for the public's point of view, how long is this gonna take? You got, by the time you lay the concrete, you got a curing process. How long, when can they see it?
So there's a lot happening. There's over 7 million in work happening right now at Ottawa Sands, that kind of several concurrent projects. And our hope is our tentative goal is August, September of this year, that they'll all come together. Probably our biggest hang up on that is there's also a project to reshape some of the shoreline of the lake to make it more suitable as habitat for fish and birds, and also construct some wetlands on the site, because when I mentioned one of the goals was to enhance the ecology of the site. For as beautiful as the park is, some of it as a former sand mine is not ideal or optimal for as habitat. So that project is waiting for one federal approval, and that's been delayed quite a while. And that's the thing that is the biggest kink in this whole thing, because and there's a permit we're waiting for on the critical dunes for the trail. So our target is August, September, as long as these permits come in and this is all done, and this all can happen this spring and summer.
So are you working on expanding that wetland area that's on the north side?
The wetland will be, there was on the south side of the park near where it's there's currently a trail through it that there was
the south side.
There was a mining lagoon that they're they had, as part of the reclamation, they were required to fill it in. We're gonna dig it up again. So but we're also engineering, you approved a grant to engineer more wetland creation, because the master plan, that will be about 4 acres. We had an 18-acre plan. So we're going to engineer the rest of the wetlands there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, hearing no other comments for Aaron. Rachel, we should probably take a roll call vote on this.
Okay, Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay. The next one would be the Ottawa Sands Day Use Restroom Construction.
So moved.
Vice Chair Minema, would you like to take the, or Roger, would you like to take the motion?
Sure, yeah, to approve the bid for Danny's excavating in the amount of $510,000 for the construction of the day use restroom at Ottawa Sands and forward to the Board of Commissioners for final approval. Furthermore, the Parks Commission requests that the Fiscal Services Department transfers $100,000 from CP 2208 Ottawa Sands Development Phase 1 Parks contribution to CP 2301 Ottawa Sands Restroom to fully fund this project with contingency for a total project amount of $585,000.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second. Any other comments or questions? Okay. All right, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Bergman,
Yes.
Mrs. Medema,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodey,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
motion passes.
Well, that concludes our action items for this meeting. The next item up is a committee report. We have Kim Walters with us on a presentation of the environmental health notice of intent. And just to confirm, the members of the committee got the packet that was presented. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys today?
Good.
Great.
Good. Right. So I'm gonna talk about what I've talked about numerous times now, Part 115 and the first step since the state has enacted the action requirements. So the first step is the notice of intent from the Board of Commissioners. So we'll go to the next one. So I have a couple extra little notes on my slides that are a little that you won't see, but for the most part, they're the same. So the first part is what I'm going to do with this presentation first is to break down the notice of intent that, as it said, it must be completed either by the Board of Commissioner chair, or it can be an authorized representative. So myself or Spencer could do it for you as long as there's minutes or something recording that you want that. So what we did, it must be completed by July 8th. So June 8th, I provided everyone with the letter that the state sent out saying that on January 8th, you have 180 days to file your notice of intent. So this is a quick overview, and then I provided on the PowerPoint the law for you. So if you want to go to the next part. So I'm not going to spoon feed it to you too much because it's pretty obvious. But I wanted to touch on a few key questions that I think you might have questions on. So for number 5, there is what I'm going to start on talking with this slide. And that is taking on the responsibility or not taking on the responsibility of becoming the county approval agency. And what that means are the things that I have on the PowerPoint there, that you're going to be the responsible party for creating the materials management plan, that you're going to implement it, which is no matter what, you'll have to implement it, whether it's the state or we ourselves write it. You have to consult with adjacent counties and then appoint the DPA, the MMPC, oversee the whole work program with the DPA. I'm throwing acronyms out there, but essentially it's keeping everything within the county. Is what we're recommending from the Solid Waste Planning Committee and myself. That's the biggest one on the first 5 slides is whether the county is going to accept writing the plan or not. So if we go on to the next slide, the biggest one here, 6 through 8, is that they do make you check each box to understand that you understand what your responsibilities are if you do accept being the CAA. As well as the other big decision the county will have to make is whether they want to be a single or a multi-county plan. The Solid Waste Planning Committee that's currently active has recommended, and I provided that letter for you too from the previous meeting in November, that they recommend being a single county but still have partnerships, but not through the materials management plan portion of it. So the biggest thing is so far they recommend being the CAA and a single county materials management plan. Want to go to the next one? All right, and this one's, this is like the download. So this is the stuff that once you decide those two big action items, there's some additional items that you need to do prior to submitting the notice of intent. So the faster we can get those two decisions made, then we can kind of start working on this for you guys as well, which is the documentations, reaching out. So the first one is the minutes saying, yes, we want to be the CAA and we want a single plan. We've drafted you a resolution. So you have something to start and something to look at, which I provided as well. And then the next one is that you have to consult with your surrounding counties. So Muskegon, Kent, and Allegan. And I also provided Kent's resolution because Kent reached out to me yesterday that they've already enacted theirs. So they're going to be the CAA. So they're doing a single county plan. And their public works will be their DPA, designated planning agency, as well as they've reached out to us to qualify for that number 10, which is notifying us. So their population size requires them to also have a response back. So we have to acknowledge that we received it, which I did because I got it. So, and we would do the same. We would send out a resolution saying this is what we've decided. So you're aware and please respond within 30 days. So those are the things that take a little bit because sometimes some counties may want to put it on, you know, official board minutes to accept it, or they might simply just have someone saying, yes, I accept it. I know they also attached John Gibbs on the email thread. So if I want to go to the next one. Yeah, so like we said, I kind of mentioned in the very beginning that so it says the board chair, but I read the law a little bit more and it says that you can designate someone to do that, which is why there's verbiage that we drafted in the resolution saying that your current DPA can do it as well. And that's the biggest one I think on that. Oh yeah. So yeah, the biggest thing is if you decline the responsibility, there's still a few actions. I didn't want to go into too much depth in this because it's our hope from the Solid Waste Planning Committee that you do accept it, but still make sure you guys are aware if you do decline to do it, you can. And what that means is the grant funding, the ability to write the plan, have input on it is essentially no longer there. And that from what I understand, the state will probably most likely have to write it for us because I've talked to some municipalities and they wouldn't want to do it. And our regional planning agency is not really active in this kind of field. So again, they probably wouldn't do it either. So it would fall into the state to write our plan, which they would try to either push it off on some other county to do, or just do a very basic plan, which we then would still have to enforce and enact. So yeah, so next slide. So yeah, so I just want to do another like overview of like where we're at in the whole planning process and stuff, because that's kind of important because everything's like a trickle down. So you do think to yourself, at least I would, that you have 180 days. You're like, okay, that's a lot of days. But at the same time, there's a lot of little steps. I mean, that was January. We're already in February. We still have to reach out to all the municipalities. You know, so if you choose not to move something like this onto the next board meeting, well, then it's sent to March. So things are easily enough to get pushed back, as well as if you want any information or any work from the Solid Waste Planning Committee or myself, I'm going on maternity leave in a week. So timelines get pushed real quick. So as well as, for example, your designated planning agency, if you choose, that's part of the actions that are required. The sooner you have that, the sooner you can start working on getting your materials management planning committee enacted, which has to go through talent recruitment process, which takes, a couple months normally too. So all those kind of start layering up in time. So I think I've showed this image to you guys before. I made it for you guys, so it's a little bit, breaks it down because there's a bigger chart that's a lot more confusing. So the biggest thing, so like I said, I want to talk here is that The sooner you start making decisions, the sooner we can start moving on for other things for you. So the biggest ask I'd have now is to make this a action item to move on to the board as soon as possible. So the action items would be to either do a resolution or through minutes, whatever option you guys feel most comfortable doing. I gave you the draft version of our resolution that we made for you guys, as well as Kent counties. So if you want to compare and contrast, you can. I did provide this all to Jack Jordan as well, so that he had it and could review it if he had the time and ability to. And then the sooner we can get this to the full board decision, like I said, then I can reach out. We can, if you choose to you can also choose to designate your DPA or designated planning agency at that time. And you can either, currently that's who I am. You can keep it with me if you want, or whoever you guys choose. Then that person start working on your materials management planning committee, and then drafting the plan setup. So, and that will make you hit all your deadlines when the state wants you to. I don't want to spoon feed too much. I want to give you guys plenty of time for questions. So,
Roger?
oh, I do want to bring up the fact that you'll see me in the future, no matter what, too, because there's the grant funds that might come. So I'll probably be at the finance committee, talent and recruitment, because the materials management plan, as well as you see a lot of other items throughout this whole process. So this is not like a one and done decision.
Okay. At this point, Commissioner Moss?
Yeah, so it sounds really good to me, and thank you, Kim. And I guess my only comment is for you, Mr. Chair, if you'd like to maybe get together, and maybe you and I could have a conversation or a meeting with Kim in the next week before she's out for a little while. Make sure we get it moving. I'm happy to help.
Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Bergman?
So I have a question, and maybe this is to Jack. Could you get us maybe the pros and cons of moving forward with this, and moving forward in terms of the timeline and that information, so that all the commissioners have the information regarding pros and cons of moving forward one way or the other?
I certainly can attempt to do that, because
Yeah,
it's a very
Yeah, that would be good.
complex
Yeah.
situation. And I met with Kim and Spencer last week to talk about Part 115 and how this all works together. And I'm sure before Kim goes on maternity, we'll be having another conversation. But I would also like to be included in the conversation when you have it with Kim. Just so I can make sure that we provide all the information to
Good.
all the commissioners at
Good.
that time.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the letter that I provided, that's something that the current solid waste planning committee has been looking at as well. And I think they have in that letter that they wrote for you guys at the November meeting, like a red and green box too, kind of like, if you don't, and if you do kind of things, here's some items that what you lose if you don't become one. Currently, we do have a solid waste management plan. So we are currently a single county. We are currently essentially doing everything that we're asking you to do. I'm sure there's other cons that I may not be aware of at a county level, but the biggest thing that we discussed at the solid waste planning committee, the biggest con would be you lose those abilities to keep it local. You lose that Ottawa County voice if we don't choose to do it. No matter what, we have to have a plan. That's the biggest thing. The Eagle will make us, the state will make us have one no matter what. Is this whether we choose to be involved in writing it or not, or choose to accept the grant funds or not that's associated with it. Those are the big things that they keep telling people, and what we discussed in the solid waste planning committee.
Commissioner Moss?
I'd much rather have Kim and staff involved than receiving something from the state. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Minema?
Morning, Kim.
Morning.
I'm looking at your sample resolution that you've drafted, and I wondered how many of the representatives that you have listed on 4A through K are similar to the ones currently on solid waste, and how many of them are hoping to put in their application as we would change to this?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect question because that's actually, we're trying to guess the solid waste planning committee. We're in this limbo right now. We're trying to guess what kind of items you might ask questions for, what kind of items you might want. How can we help you guys expedite any processes going forward so we can be as timely as possible? And that's one of them. So currently there's a 14-member committee and it'll be switched to 11. The biggest change is that you lose the general public seats of 3, and then they get more detailed. So our, the first discussion that we had is who wants to stay, and then where can we place them? So from the 14 to the 11, it essentially leaves 2 open positions that we can't fill with our current board. Some of the members will just have to either participate as public or just no longer participate in the committee, but it leaves open the facilities that generate a material that's managed within the county, as well as the composter or digester position. So what we did to kind of help expedite things and kind of figure out who might want to be, because they're kind of specific. So we reached out to composters that we know in the area. We reached out to businesses that we know that have, may have interest in this kind of topic. The generated material is managed, which would be, it could be trash, recycling materials, compost, those type of items. We kind of focus based on the direction on like some food industry as well as our large known industries in our area. And like colleges too, we reached out to some of them and they had interest too. So we tried to, so that we can kind of say, hey, here's the seats that we can't fill with our current ones. And here's who people that are interested for you guys ahead of time so that they know to apply when the time comes. So essentially to answer your question, the simplest way is 2 seats would be still open, but we've already reached out to some that are interested in filling those positions.
Great. So sounds like 9 of them would automatically have people that will apply to be on the new material management planning committee from solid waste that are currently serving. And then the
Yeah.
2 seats that you're already working
Mhm.
ahead of time to at least let them know, hey, when it comes time,
Mhm.
hopefully there's some people that will
Yes.
apply for it.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing the work ahead of time, because I know this is a big
Mhm.
list of seats to fill, and the time, like you're saying, will go
Yeah.
quickly. So.
Yeah, and I do have Kelly Goward. She's the chair of the solid waste planning committee here too. So if there's items that you guys want from them, that's essentially that's an ask that they have for you guys is what do you want them to do in this, interim? Is there items that you want them to do, educational things that you want to know about? They're here to help you until the transition helps. They chose to stay on to help out with you guys.
I guess question I have for my fellow committee members is if we are at a point of consensus that we can continue momentum that's already been in place to take, as Commissioner Moss mentioned in the conversation, so that we can take it to board action.
I would agree that I think if you guys come back with something and we get material from Mr. Jordan, I think we need to move forward ASAP. Okay. Move this process along.
Okay. Commissioner Rhodey?
So I guess my only question on that is, will we have enough time in 1 week or do we need 3 weeks? Do we think we can move it along before next week's board meeting?
I mean, I'd like a month. I'd like to
Yeah, I think.
take the time this month
Yeah.
to wrap everything up and get it done in March.
Okay.
And I'm not sure it helps you too, just, I reached out to the surrounding counties yesterday as well. Allegheny County is planning to do the similar thing as of now. That hasn't gone to the level that Kent County has, but they also plan to do a single county. Kent's doing single county. And for my last conversation with Muskegon, which I haven't gotten a response back yet, is that they're planning to do a multi-county, but with their regional planning agency, which is more north. So.
Mr. Minima?
Is there a point person, Kim, while you are gone that we should be reaching out to through John or?
Yep, I've sent emails out so that things can keep going forward. Spencer Ballard, my manager, he is the point as well as Kelly.
Okay.
Kelly Goward is the chair for the solid waste planning committee right now. They will be taking on items for me while I'm gone.
Okay, I think we have our marching orders. Kim, thank you for all the preparation and all the work into this. I think you've really led us to a position where we're in good shape.
Perfect, thank you. And reach out to me at any time if you guys have questions. If I can't answer it while I'm gone, someone will.
Thanks.
Yeah,
And-
thank you.
And enjoy your leave.
Thank you, I will.
Okay, that brings us to our next item on the agenda, which is the farmland protection presentation from Becky Hedinga from Department of Strategic Impact. Thanks for being with us this morning, Becky.
And while that gets set up, I'll just say that I'm also on the Solid Waste Planning Committee, and Kim has done a really good job setting us up. The whole committee has been really engaged in this process, and it sounds really wonky, but it's pretty straightforward. And I think we're in a really good spot for making this transition. I feel really comfortable with where it's at, even with Kim's departure. Everyone's, we're all kind of on the same page and worked really hard on this. And it's great to have people that are that engaged in this process, sounds pretty dry and boring, but
It's pretty important.
we have fun in the meeting. So so it's good stuff. So it looks like we're ready. So off we go. So invited here just talk a little bit about this program informationally. There's no ask or action item following this. So I'll just keep it really brief. I just picked out some different nuggets about the program that I thought you would find interesting, but it's obviously wide open to any questions about any aspect, and we're happy director. So we're all in the house. Allison obviously is on the board as well. So all sorts of knowledge in the room. Oops, we already skipped it forward. So I like to lead with qualitative over quantitative. We are going to talk about quantitative, but it's just a lot more fun to speak qualitatively. We'll just start out with a little bit of the why we do this program, the threat to farmland, and then we'll move into kind of some mechanics of the program itself. Trying to make eye contact with Roger over there, but over here a little bit. So this is one of our preserved farm families. This is a crude off family. You can see that there's 3 generations there. They have farmlands permanently preserved in Kent County and in Ottawa County. Tim at the top there took this farm over from his dad, Wilson. So, potentially we could have 4 generations farming on this land. And that is the really fun aspect of it. Tim was just named Master Farmer by Progressive Farmer for his conservation practices and the way that he cares for the soil and, embraces agriculture and attacks problems and uses innovation. So it's fun. Now, not every farmer that we preserve is like that. When we preserve farmland, it's really about from the soil down. We care about from the soil up, but that can change over time. These easements are permanent. So yes, we want the best operator possible from the soil up, but we really want land that is in the right place, that's the right soil type where we should keep farming. So, but Tim just happens to be a great example. So I wanted to lead with that. So let's move into quantitative. There we go. Total number of acres, what this program's all about, acres of land to farm on. So these are the top counties in the state of Michigan that in terms of numbers of acres of land in farms. So Huron's the top at 500,000 acres of land in farming. And then you can see the rest of the top 5 counties there. But then we move over to market value of ag products sold. Huron again, and I wish this was a little larger. Sometimes when you're working on your screen, you think it's going to be just right on a bigger screen, and it's not just right. So I apologize for that, but you did have it in your packets. So Huron again is top, but then you look at the next 2 counties in terms of market value, Allegan and then Ottawa. So then the next step, I'm like, okay, well, let's look at land and farms for those top producing counties. So Huron again at that 500,000, Allegan, 229, which is well below that 5th county of Saginaw, and then Ottawa at 171, still well below. So I thought, maybe I'll do a little math here a minute. So we did some math. So market value per acre of land and farms, that's where it gets really interesting. You look at the per acre value of Huron, big hitter from land and economic impact, but then dollars per acre. you know, with our nursery crops and our blueberries and our orchard crops, it's a big economic impact here in Ottawa County. And I thought that was a really good fun fact. I should go back and look at like Leelanau and Grand Traverse and see how their numbers stack up. But I got to believe just with these raw numbers that we're on the top or right there. So I thought this was a pretty good stat. So quantitatively, that's why we do what we do. In the previous slide, qualitatively, keeping that land available for people to farm for future generations. The threats really comes down to farmers getting old and getting out, and we don't have enough farmers in the pipeline to come in and take over. Now, it's a little bit of a separate problem from easements, but easements are just one thing that we do of many to try to keep farmers on the land. And when I was writing my first beginning farmer and rancher development program grant, I thought, how do I term this? And it really comes down to kind of this one fact. You know, what we do with easements and succession planning, and the other things we're working on is try to basically curtail or slow down the loss of farmers, in that order, farms and farmland, because that's how the dominoes fall, right? Farmers get old and get out, so their land comes up for sale. So a bigger farmer might pick that up and they get bigger, or we might lose it to development. So on the 2017 census stats that you hear me quote ad nauseum, we lost 17% of farmers, but only 8% of farmland. And that reflects that mechanism there. And so then we ultimately end up losing farmland. So farmers, farms, and then farmland, kind of in that order. So that's a huge threat. And that's those first two bullets, the loss of farmers and then loss of farms. And then conversion, you know, if a bigger farmer picks it up, it's still in farming, it's still available for farming, it's still producing the things that we need, but we do lose a lot of land in conversion, mostly to rural housing development. And that is a huge threat nationwide. As I've mentioned before, it's 40% of the farmland that we lose is to conversion from ag to R1. And then this is on everybody's radar. I don't, you know, it's something we need to be aware of going forward, but foreign ownership of land, Michigan had the third highest growth rate in terms of foreign land ownership nationwide. But then I just read an article yesterday that the GAO discovered that the report that I had been looking at the week before was flawed. So whether that, so stand by, I already put that in my slide and had turned it in. And then I read that that report may be flawed, but at any rate, it is a concern. We do need to be concerned about foreign ownership of land in farming. So there we go. And then, you know, it's not just Ottawa County, it's the whole state, it's nationwide, but Farm Bureau really values preserving farmland. And this is their policy, and I refer to their policy book on a lot of things. And I just highlighted some of the key language in there. You know, the effective implementation of temporary and permanent farmland protection tools is something that they support. We won't get into all of this narrative. But, you know, they want innovative farmland protection funding approaches. That's what we try to work on statewide, not just here in Ottawa County, but everywhere. And try to be creative. How do we link this to urban development, maybe density issues and planned unit development and things like that. So we need to be creative overall in protecting farmland, in securing easements and doing some density trade-offs with those where we can, which we don't do really in Ottawa County right now, but it's something to look ahead to. So, but we'll talk today about what we actually do in Ottawa County, not the future, what we are doing right now and what we'll continue to do, and that's farmland preservation programs. So this is just, these are the three ways that farmers in Ottawa County currently can preserve their land. So locally led and permanent is a purchase of development rights program under ordinance, under the Planning Act, and that's what we do here. So that's one way. The second way is state led and permanent. So a landowner, and some have in Ottawa County, can donate their development rights to the state of Michigan. The local unit has no say in that process. That landowner has that right to take that development rights stick out of his bundle of rights and donate it to the state. And we have 654 acres that have been permanently preserved in that way. So that is a way that people can permanently preserve their land in the county. And then the last way is state-led and temporary. And that's the PA 116 program that most people are familiar with, a term of anywhere from 10 to 99 years to temporarily protect from development rights in return for a tax credit, income tax credit. But we're going to focus today on the PDR because that's what we do here out of our office in the Department of Strategic Impact. So this is a little timeline, just, you know, because this is supposed to be just informational. So here's kind of where it all started. We passed the ordinance in 2008. It was a slow go at first. So we got our board together. We had our first meeting, finally launched applications. That was in 13. We passed the ordinance in 8. So in 13, we finally did our first call for applications. And then we finally preserved our first farm in 16. Now, when the program started, we did hire a consultant for a period of time. And then we switched to having a 20-hour-a-week part-time analyst dedicated to the program. And that's how it continues today. But I do want to point out, that's when the ordinance was passed. But we didn't just haul off in 2008 and decide to protect farmland. Way back in 2003, stakeholder groups were convened, white papers were written, research was done ad nauseum out of my office. Farmers would come and talk to us. We really beat this up and went, is this something that we should be doing as a county, and how do we want to do that? So, a number of years of research went into this before this ordinance was written and passed. And this is the intro to our ordinance that we did pass. So the key components here are the ordinance is designed to protect farmland, and it is voluntary. No landowner is ever going to be required to do anything. They come to us and apply voluntarily to sell their development rights. And all of the resources that we use are to purchase the easement itself. Now we have staff time, but to purchase the easement itself are sources other than the county general fund. No general funds have ever been used to secure an easement in this county. And so this is where the action happens. This is my little map. When I started working on this program in 2018, we had 7 townships that were colored green in here. We're now up to 11, which is fun. But, and then you see the hashtag one up there in Spring Lake Township. They passed a resolution of support for the program. They're basically built out. They have a couple of blueberry farms left up in Spring Lake Township. So participating really doesn't make sense, but they do want to show as a township they value agriculture in Ottawa County. So they passed a resolution of support. But those communities that are white still, the only way they can preserve their farmland is to donate to the state. And down there in Holland Township, there are a couple of properties that did. And then the other properties that have donated are also in the green colored areas, but they can only donate or use PA 116. They have no opportunity to sell their development rights unless it's through a conservancy. In our area, there's no conservancy in the service area that values agriculture enough to place an easement on it. So that's how things function here in the county in terms of resolutions to participate. And that's one thing that but just to stress, townships choose to participate in the program. We've talked to Holland Township numerous times and they just thought, well, it's not right for us right now. We've talked to Allendale Township and they've considered it, been good listeners, good questions, but they're just not ready to pass that resolution, and that's okay. So it's township by township chooses to participate or chooses not to, whatever's right for their community. And then we provide them, once they pass, this little how-to, so the townships have something they can refer to and they understand how the process works, because they don't get a lot of applications. Like once every couple of years, a community might see an application and be like, what is this? So we try to provide that support and help them understand and work through the process. So by the numbers, the red areas that you're seeing are the properties that we have preserved to date, which is 566 acres under this program. We have 398 acres in the queue right now. We'll preserve one this month, one next month, and then 3 more coming. And then we're going to be up to almost 1,000 acres under this program, which will be exciting. So if you add those to the state preserved land, we're about 1,600 acres total permanently preserved farmland in the county of our 171,000 acres we have in farming. So it's a small amount, but at least it's never going to be anything but agriculture. So we have that. Program data. So I mentioned that we have 566 acres preserved. The total value of those development rights, and this is based on the appraised value at the time, not, actualized to today's value, but the total when they were secured is just over $2 million value in the development rights. The average ag value per acre in the county on those properties is just south of $4,000. And then the last 3 numbers there, and I put those percentages in there because I think they're important. So the total value of the development rights that the landowner gave up was compensated for some and donated some. Landowners donated roughly 29% of the value of their development rights. So they have skin in the game. They said, I want to permanently preserve my land, and they were willing to take less than market value to do that. And then we hustle and secure grant funding to the tune of about 57% of the value of those development rights. And then our program raises private funds, and that is about 14%. So we get a pretty good return on our investment of those locally generated funds. So that's how we put this program together. Now, benchmarking other I'm going back to qualitative, and then we'll go to benchmarking. So those 566 acres, let's look at those. There's the Hale family, our first farm. They're 35 acres in Polkton Township. Matt Hale changed his whole business model to this really cool direct market. They have a processing facility there in his farm. He's really done a good job. So he's kind of the godfather of farmland preservation here in Ottawa County. That's the Klein family. Shirley in the green and Don in the brown jacket. In partnership with their brother Jim, who's a tiny guy hiding in the middle there. They preserved 55 acres up in Chester Township. And then Jim, we also did a project and preserved 168 acres of just Jim's, but he doesn't like pictures, so we didn't get a picture of him with a sign. So I'm just calling that out here. And then this is Carson DeHaan. He's down in Blendon. He's got 30 some acres. I think he's 37 acres in Blendon Township. And then we've got the Broncomas that are over in Olive Township. There are 123 acres there. Preserved. And then that's the last permanently preserved one that we have. So now we're going to zoom out a little bit and kind of compare to other communities. So just for perspective, this map is from the state of Michigan, and it shows all the other local PDR programs in the state. So unless you are located in one of those yellow areas, you can't sell your development rights. And that's unfortunate. There's some conservancies that might purchase an agricultural easement, but the big question is might, whether they have that in part of their mission and they really want to do that. So it'd be nice to see a lot more yellow on this map and have a lot more farmers have the ability to permanently preserve their land and be compensated for that lost development potential. But I just like to give that for perspective. And of those communities, because we like to, there's a lot of reasons I tried to gather this data. I sent this email out in January to all the other communities that we had contact information for and asked them to share with us how many acres have you preserved. And I don't expect you to understand this. I'll explain it. It's not the prettiest spreadsheet, but I just put it together quickly once we got responses. So how many acres you've preserved? What are your funding sources? How does your program work? So we can compare and contrast, because I thought that might be valuable to you if you're new to the program. So if you look there, Ottawa County's on there. You know, what year did you start? We've got our 567 acres and we have paid staff. You can kind of tick down through those communities that responded and see their acres and how they function. And then the total value over there is $55 million worth of development rights and the average ag value at 3,800. So that's all interesting stuff. But I'm going to click to an even uglier spreadsheet here in a minute because I think it's important. Because these townships, it's Washtenaw County, and then all those townships are within Washtenaw County. So watch what happens on the next slide. Like I said, big and ugly. But right here, that column are the communities that have millages. They have dedicated funding streams and they raise millions of dollars. And you can see over back in the acres preserved column, they have a lot bigger number, you know, so if you have some dedicated funding to meet those match requirements from your grant funders, you can accelerate how fast you can preserve farmland really quickly. Some communities have that benefit, some communities don't. So when we benchmark, you know, we are best off to look at communities that don't have dedicated funding streams because it's just not apples to apples if you have a millage. But we all work together in the sandbox. You know, I communicate with the folks from Washtenaw and those other communities and consultants all the time. We all work together to help each other grow our programs, and that's a great thing. For balance, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, they are the granddaddy of land preservation. They have 113,000 acres permanently preserved through a local PDR program. And they started in 1988. They have a total ag acres of 630,000 acres, and they preserved 113,000 of those acres. This is where folks like Denny Heffron from Kent County, they'll set up a tour and they'll get a busload of people to go out there, and they'll get people that maybe aren't too sure about farmland preservation or how it works, and they bring them out to Lancaster and they come back and they're huge champions for it. I've not been able to make that trip. I'd like to someday, but they kind of set the bar in terms of conservation easements for agriculture. So yeah, we got a ways to go with our little tiny yellow communities. And, you know, we're not going to get there from here. I think the state really needs to start doing some mini capacity building grants to try to grow these programs. There's only probably 8 maybe of those yellow communities that are really active and apply for grant funding, and the rest of them simply don't have the capacity. And I've talked to multiple communities that don't have a program at all, and they can't get it propped up because it's just too hard to do if you don't have some support in your community and some sort of buy-in, staff capacity somewhere. And so all those people are left to move to their conservancies and hope that maybe their conservancy will buy the development rights. And we are covered, every part of the state's covered by a land conservancy. Very few of them have preserving agricultural land in their mission, but those are kind of the options for our farmers in the state of Michigan. In other states, like South Dakota, they have a statewide trust dedicated to agricultural land. So any farmer in the state of South Dakota has the opportunity to sell their development rights to an ag land trust. That's not something we have here in the state of Michigan. It's something that could be considered. The consideration there is that it removes the local unit from the process. So that's the thing. The local unit doesn't have a say in that matter anymore if we were to have a farmland trust, but that's just another thing that's happening elsewhere, just again, for perspective. That other folks are doing to allow easements to be placed everywhere in their state. So this is a slide I like to close with, and people who have seen this slide are probably tired of seeing this, but the Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And you could say the same thing about farmland, because we don't want to see that. So on that note, I'll take any questions you might have about the program.
Go ahead, Roger.
Becky, you know, when I look back, you know, when I was a kid, I picked blueberries in the area of Holland City, so north of Holland. And you know, when I drive past those places today, those blueberry fields are all gone. And when I think of so many blueberry fields that are gone in my lifetime, and now we're dealing with one that's pretty divisive in Spring Lake Township. That's, I think, 90 acres. Is it 90
I think
acres?
it's more than that. I think it's 250.
Oh, okay.
But maybe
yeah,
not.
Quite a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a big fight over that. But the challenge is that for many of the blueberry farmers, to raise blueberries today is difficult in terms of making money.
Mhm.
So you got that on the one hand, right? And
Yep.
then on the other hand, you want to preserve that land. I mean, I want to preserve blueberries in Ottawa County because I think it's good for the county to have that forever, you know? But if you can't make money selling blueberries, how do you balance those two things, right?
Yep.
So, you know, that's the challenge. And I know Grand Haven Township, we've talked to them several times to try to get them to buy in, but they have kind of pushed it back as well
Mhm.
over the years. So that's not one of the communities that is involved, nor is, well, Spring Lake Township is kind of now, right?
Yeah, but to be honest, Roger, I mean, we wouldn't put a conservation easement on where those blueberries are because it wouldn't make sense. It's
Yeah.
too close to infrastructure. It's an island. Even
Yeah.
if they had a resolution, we wouldn't preserve there as a board. I mean, I'm speaking for my board right now,
Yeah,
but I know
yeah.
that my board members agree that we
Yeah.
wouldn't do that.
I understand. So,
Yeah, but you're hitting the nail on the head, and that's a conversation we could have for quite a while, and it's one we're really digging into a little bit more right now, actually, and I'll just keep it super brief response to the blueberry question. So Park Township just passed their resolution for those exact reasons. It's tough to make money in blueberries. If you don't have the wherewithal to yank all your bushes and put in high density and really make some technological changes to compete, you know, but you've got developers offering you huge dollars for that land. But we
Yes.
can't say, hey, can you just, you know, keep losing your shirt for a few more years because we don't want to lose our blueberry ground? You know, it's really a challenging thing to address. And then if we're really going to be pragmatic about it, you look at blueberry ground and we're going to preserve it permanently for agriculture. It's basically a wetland. Blueberries are a wetland plant.
Right.
So if you choose not to grow blueberries there anymore, what do you do with that land? You know, it's really kind of a unitasker, but they're high value and they're huge, you know, so we need to preserve that land. So there's just a lot of nuances. So it's been interesting in talking with Howard Fink and Mika Weiss from Park as we go through this. And we have an event coming up on the 27th in Park Township that we're going to bring farmers together for about 3 hours. And we're going to talk about farmland preservation because it's new to their community. But we're also going to talk about wetland reserve easements, which are not nearly as financially beneficial, but it is a tool out there and there's a lot of federal dollars dumped into that program as an option to try to maintain solvency. We're talking about succession planning, you know, is there a way we can pull some go-getter younger farmers in to take over this land, you know, and that's kind of where conservation easements really could come in on blueberry ground. If we can raise enough money to preserve blueberry ground in Park Township, which is going to be a heavy lift, but if we could, and we could drop a big chunk of money in their pocket, then they have the money to pull out those old plants, to replant high density, to become more competitive, you know, so there's a lot of different pieces and parts, but the farmers have been really engaged. Mika had 30 farmers come up to it, like a focus group she had. And so it's a big issue with no clear answers, but at least we're talking about it and we're getting there. So it's a great observation and it's something we're talking about a lot right now. So, you know.
Any other questions for Becky? Okay, thank you for the presentation. It was great. I keep learning a lot about this issue. Myself growing up in Chester and kind of similar to Roger, you know, it was apple orchards that I was
Yep.
involved in growing up and, you know, that's a big part of my heart. So,
Yep, we're going to preserve our first apple orchard hopefully this year. So yeah, so it'll be great. Well, thanks for having me. I'm always happy to come and chat and we're always available for questions. And thank you to my board for showing up. Thanks.
Thanks, Becky.
thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is a discussion item. This is a legislative update, essentially pertaining to septic inspections. I guess the genesis of this was last week, a presentation from Department of Equalization talked about some of our sales and properties. And so it seems like this might be an opportunity as it heard that some of the potential for our sales are starting to slow down a little bit. Maybe this is a time that we can look at some of our ordinances and procedures. Also in light of legislative conversations we had last year, Lansing's looking at potential for state having more directions on septic and well inspections and that type of thing. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Gibbs, and I know we have staff here as well, Spencer Ballard and Addie Hamley and Joe Bush. You're welcome to all kind of weigh in on this. This is just a discussion item, so thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair Belknap. We did receive an updated copy of the legislation that is being considered right now in the legislature. If you recall, Public Health had a while ago sent a pretty good analysis of the previous version of that and the enormous cost it would impose on the county. And so I asked Addie to prepare an updated version of that based on the latest version of the legislation. We have not sent that out to you yet. I'll send it out to you later today, but I'll hand it right over to Addie to kind of present what this legislation does and why it'd be pretty harmful to the county.
Thank you.
Good
Good morning.
I think it was May or so of last year. This document should look somewhat familiar. If you click on those links, it'll still show the draft that was in the analysis from May of last year. The drafts that are currently out that Administrator Gibbs can share are not posted on the state sites. And those have some changes. There were some improvements from the original, but there's still some significant problems. I think one of the key things that was changed in the original versus this draft that's out there was the original had requirement for every evaluation required a septic tank to be pumped. And they've made that optional or at the recommendation of the reviewing agency. However, there's still some significant issues. The background I provided, essentially, I think it's, you know, some of the narrative that's out there is that, you know, Michigan is the only state without a statewide code and that our waterways are all impacted negatively because of on-site systems. And I can say that there are lots of other states that do have statewide codes that have some significant issues. So that doesn't make the local control that Michigan's adopted worse, or I would argue in most cases, I think it's better than. And so the other thing is when we did have a grant, it was quite a few years ago now, maybe 2015, where we actually had a PhD employee that did DNA testing for water sampling. And he did some sampling on the grant for us, and the DNA that we found for pig and cow was so high that it had to be diluted a lot to even detect human. And of course, living here, I think that Grand Rapids has fixed the issue, but you know, in the past, there were certainly lots of sanitary sewer overflows from the municipal treatment upriver. And so two significant impacts to our waterways being ag runoff and municipal treatment systems are not addressed by this board or by this proposed legislation. I think highlighting some of this, we're estimating, because one of the issues with this proposed legislation is there is not a master database of septic systems. We don't have some list of everybody that has one. I would say Ottawa County probably has a more complete list because we've had our time of sale program since 1984. It's the longest in the state, which requires inspection of a system at the time of sale. But going on the numbers we do have, we're estimating that we have about 50,000 on-site sewage treatment systems. And so with this legislation, we would have to do an inspection of those systems every 5 years. So that's 12,500 systems a year. I noted, if you compare to the document that was last year, I made the range 200 to 800 per inspection because the pumping of the tank may not apply to every single one. But it's still a pretty significant cost of $2.5 million to $10 million a year imposed on county residents. I would say, I probably don't have to say this, but the legislation would definitely be viewed as an invasion of personal property rights by our citizens and homeowners. I think that the time of sale program is a lot less stressful time, as people have all kinds of inspectors in and out of the property, usually when they're selling their home, and has the added benefit of having some money on the table during that transaction that can be negotiated. So it's a lot less stress for a homeowner if there's a problem found. So we also, one of the things with this is it sets up rules to create the standards for permitting and inspection, but those don't exist yet. So it would be approving a legislation to adopt a statewide code, but nobody has seen or knows what the statewide code would be because it's not adopted yet or created yet. And the concern for us is when we do permitting, we have a lot, I think Becky kind of teed me up. There's a lot of high water table areas that aren't subject to flood, but it's higher water table. So for Ottawa County, if it's not subject to flood, we will are able to permit it. It may have pre-treatment or some other type of special requirements, but it's permittable. The state code that it currently exists for commercial properties or for subdivisions requires 2 feet to seasonal high water table. And so if they adopt a code statewide that's similar to what's in place for the state right now, we're estimating that about 30% of the permits that we issue for properties for building would not be eligible for permitting. And again, this is all kind of conjecture because there's no rules in being proposed with this, but we're just kind of basing it off of what the other state codes are. And so that's a concern, of course, if there's that many properties that immediately become unbuildable. We're estimating, even as a review agency, because there are registered inspectors for this, not counties aren't inspectors, counties are reviewers of the inspector's document, but it'd still be a significant cost at probably 15-ish, again, until we know what more details of what the requirements would be for the inspection review. We're just kind of estimating. I would say too, this new bill does have some provisions for funding. However, there's no, as far as I could find, there's no dollar amounts or anything attached. It just said there could be funds for this. So it's hard to say what that is. There could be funds for homeowners if you find a failed system. There could be funds for homeowners to pay for the evaluation. I think there could be funds for counties to administer it. But we have no idea because there's no talk of what that might look like or how much it might be. They think they're in the provision too. One of the concerns with the original was that with requiring everything to be pumped, there wasn't a capacity for septic pumpers across the state to handle that level of influx. But there also wasn't capacity for municipal treatment to handle that level of influx of septic to be dropped off and treated. So that does have the same kind of statement, like funding available for municipalities to treat septic, but again, not stated the amount and how that would work. So I would say if we kind of look at, besides some of those things for our negative impacts, I think there are some challenges with how this would be enforced that we have concerns with. If a homeowner doesn't get the evaluation like they're supposed to every 5 years, it's pretty significant fines. I think it was $1,000 up to $15,000. And that can go on a lien on a property, and all of that requirement to comply goes to the local agencies to enforce and local prosecutors, which would be a significant burden. There's questions in place that if they don't have an evaluation or if there's a problem found and it's not fixed, because these systems are expensive, $5,000, $10,000. It's a hardship for a lot of people. Are we expected to then say that they don't have a functioning system and deem the home uninhabitable and kick people out of their homes? So would be an issue. It's not clear how that would be handled. Let's see. The new legislation is similar to the last iteration, had local control completely gone for creating the code, but it also removed specifically states if there's a time of sale program that has to be gone. And so what I would argue, I think let me see. There is, hold on, let me look. I'm going to find my page so that I can point it out because this is specific. I think it's on 5. So I would argue that it's better that if they would maintain, if there's some sort of statewide, that again, for correcting the fails, like you can see on the top, our program for real estates, our transfer evaluations, it's been in place since 1984. I think it serves the purpose of correcting and identifying those issues. And it does so at a time when homes are inspected, people are anticipating that. Again, there's money on the table. I think that with the recommendation, if there was something that had to go forward and doing it as a trigger, as far as they're rebuilding a significant remodel or the property sold, makes a lot more sense than a blank every 5 years. People have to get billed and inspected and forced to comply in a way that they may not be able to. Essentially, though, so while there were a few changes, again, still some really significant hurdles that I would recommend that we don't support. But I think it's kind of all summarized in there. I think I kind of hit the high points of what the issues are. So if anybody has any questions?
Commissioner Moss?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Do we know, or from Bob, do we know the likelihood of this passing or the timeline? Any additional conjecture on that?
I don't. So statewide sanitary code, I can say, has been something that has been attempted for the last 20 years. It has not gone. I don't know if with the current state elected makeup, if it's more likely or not. I'm hoping that there's some thought to the impact of what this means for any state resident, the burden and the financial impact and that this would create. But I'm not sure. I can say there is supposed to be a work group on Friday, I believe, or later this week with Representative Skaggs, who is the sponsor, bill creator, and Eagle, and I think some people from local health departments expressing their concerns, because we're certainly not alone in the concerns with this.
Well, it seems like there'd be significant concerns across the state. Not just loss of local control, like, because, we know as local government, we need to rely on local control, free market principles, things like that. And decisions made are always made best either by the people or the level of government that's closest to them. So this would implement a statewide, policy. It seems to me like the financial burden would be huge, even more so on other counties. Is that
I would
right?
agree. Yeah. I think we're actually would be ahead of the curve in having the real estate, in that we correct and see properties regularly. That there are other counties that don't have anything. And so I can't imagine their first year, if they're going out and they have, 50 or 60% fail rate, depending on whatever standards get created across the state. Because right now, again, we compare to our local code. If the state code is 2 feet to seasonal, then we have a whole lot of systems that would be technically failing, because of their installation. I am not sure. I can't imagine how this would work statewide. Honestly, I just can't, but
It literally seems impossible.
yeah,
Not that
it's-
they won't try to do it, but
it's kind of a mess, truly. But
I had one other question. You had mentioned in the possible legislation, the county would not act as inspectors, but reviewers. Who would their inspectors be? How do they handle that?
So as part of this, I think the original one has, they pay to the state to be a registered inspector. And then the state does audits, and if there's issues, the state would go out to see if there was a problem. This bill keeps that. I think it increases the cost to become a registered evaluator, and it increased the penalty for lying on a report to $10,000. And so those independent inspectors would go out and do their report and then have to submit it to the local health department as a reviewer. And as part of that, I believe the local agency has to collect a $50 fee from them at the time that they submit it and pass that through to the state. So
Lots of opportunities for new taxes.
yeah, and I mean, there's concerns. What part of the reason when we created the real estate transfer valuation, I'm learning some of the history from working with Wimlar and some of the agents that they've had that have been here since '84, that they requested purposely that it stayed with county inspectors because they had agents that were being sued by the buyer or the seller, depending on who felt that they were wronged from the independent inspector. And their concerns, I think, similarly with this, a lot of your inspectors may be installers or, some other ties to industry. There's always concerns. I think they're trying to thwart that with the $10,000 fine, but how that will be enforced and audited and everything, I just don't know. So.
Are there other counties that are right now using that kind of a model where they're having private inspectors do inspections at time of sale?
Yeah, so Grand Traverse has, I think it's Grand Traverse, maybe I was speaking. It's Traverse City area. I know they have a time of sale and it's county inspectors. Washtenaw has a time of sale and it's independent inspectors that have to be certified through Washtenaw County, and then they do a review. I think most of the other, I think there's about 12 counties that have a time of sale program, and I believe it's just us in Grand Traverse that have the in-house inspectors, and the rest have independent and then review their inspection.
Do you know what the counties around us are doing?
Kent and Allegan and Muskegon do not have a time of sale program.
Okay.
I don't believe that they have anything in place other than if there's a complaint or a new permit or a repair applied for to assess.
Okay. Is there any aspect of that particular piece of this legislation that could be helpful? Would it be helpful, for instance, to relieve our workload at all, to move to a private inspector, kind of a system where we're reviewing those inspections?
The biggest issue that I see, and so I think besides the having like a neutral party do the inspection, is the delay. So often we get the application when there's already like a deal struck. So they have closing scheduled. And usually if just inserting that in between creates another delay. So they might go out in a week and then they give it to us, and then there's a week to review it. And if there's problems, it goes back. That I think is one of the bigger hurdles. I can touch base with Dale's on at Wimlar and ask him for more specifics. Those are the two that stick out from when we worked through this in the past. I think the one thing to note too is that, so there is a discrepancy, I think, Commissioner Moss stated, like between counties. I think we have a unique perspective because we've had a really great sanitary code, and I think we've had really talented inspectors that started in the 70s that did a good job with permitting and documentation. There are a lot of counties that don't have that. However, it's in this document, there's already a mechanism in place for the state to make some changes in those counties that may be below the bar through the accreditation process. Like, we're required to meet certain metrics, we're required to do certain things. And so by changing how the accreditation process works a little bit, they could maybe bring some of those up to the bar. Because I think how we're viewing it is that there's this bar in the state sanitary code. If I feel like, and maybe I'm, not, I feel like we're up here above the bar in general, Ottawa County. And, you may have some down here, and the statewide sanitary codes brings them this way. I would argue that they should use the accreditation process to bring these up and let the high functioning counties stay up where we're at. So, but I can get you more information on the real estates too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Miedema?
Just curiosity, have you seen any research from, states that have gone the route of legislating to have a statewide sanitary code, and then the ramifications that were mentioned even with home loss? Is there anything out there that you've seen?
I haven't, and I think it's partly because of that Michigan was rather unique to set it up the way we did through local agency control. I think most of the other states just started out when they wanted to regulate it, and most of the states, I would think you're looking at the 60s and 70s when it kind of officially became a regulated thing, started out with a statewide. But I'll look into that and see if there were any that switched.
Commissioner Moss?
One more comment. It seems like this is going to be additional regulation, and it really sounds like an unfunded mandate to me, where the state comes in and makes changes that will not have funding. So I would anticipate additional continued pushback from local units and people at the state level. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes.
I just had a couple things. Agree that, the time of sale is far better. In your mind, is there any correlation to this proposed legislation and some of the environmental crisis and the PFAS situations that have occurred in the state? I don't know if there was any, impetus for looking at this sanitary legislation as a result of some of those things that have taken place.
I don't think so. I mean, I guess there could be contamination of PFAS, but it would be minimal from a household septic system versus, like Wolverine or some of the industrial processes. That's not to say it doesn't exist, because, but I don't know if that was the push. I want to say it's been tried to be, I know it's been 20 plus years, but I think since 2016, or it's been almost annually, it's been some iteration of this has been attempted to be introduced. And so I think it's more being driven from some of like the surface water, rivers, lake, stream water quality. There are other areas of the state that do have far more impact than we do. Again, I think Ottawa's had a strong sanitary code and permitting processes, but there have been some horror stories of other areas across the state with cottages along the lake that just have discharge pipes, then algal blooms in the lake and things like that. I think those are more of what's driving it.
And then just to kind of piggyback on Joe's comment, have we heard anything from our local units, either weighing in one way or another, continued support of our current environment? I know we get postcards where I live in Grand Haven Township reminding residents that, the township even asks that our tanks are pumped on a 3-year cycle.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's been ultimately they want to maintain that. If there's, nobody wants to have sewage on the ground or their rivers or lakes or ponds or the residents live on ruined. I think it's been a good partnership too in verifying that there's a permit in place before they issue a building permit for remodeling or new construction. I hear from other places, other counties across state, that can be a challenge, that doesn't happen all the time. So they'll show up and the home is completely built and they haven't had a permit or anything done for a septic system. We don't really see that here. And again, the real estates, I can say Barry Eaton, I think it's been a long time, 5-8 years, they had tried to start a time of sale program in their jurisdiction. And when they initially started, I think they were seeing failure rates when they went to do an inspection of 40, 50, I think around 40%, it was hovering. And I know ours, again, it's been so long, with so many properties being seen more than once, I think we're hover around 15, perhaps, somewhere right around there. So there's definitely differences in areas across the state. But the townships have been really, I think, really great about, notifying people, educating people. We have a lot of people moving too that don't know what a septic system is and don't necessarily realize that they're even on one. Happens when we have a lot of building in our rural areas and they're maybe moving in from municipal. So.
Okay. Commissioner Rhodey?
Yep. One piece of feedback that we hear sometimes is that the one difficulty with the point of sale model is that some of our realtors are telling us that it's delaying sales and they're having difficulty with some of that timing that can be so critical with those sales due to delays from inspections. And so I guess that would just be one point where I would I'd be interested to hear if we can look for some solutions and how can we speed that up? Would it help to also open it up to private inspections? Would there be any way for us to oversee that? So maybe if we can just take another look at that, think about it and see if there's anything we can do to help with those sales, because ultimately that's hurting the constituents too when they're buying.
Yeah, I would be feel free to send them our way, or to Spencer Ballard. He's the new ACE manager. So yeah, tell him to contact Spencer. Spencer. No, I think I'd like to know why or what's happening. Because we do have 10 days or less turnaround for our real estate evaluations. And we actually subscribe to or pay for through WMLR the super keys like realtors have, so we can not have to wait to schedule, so we can get in quickly. I think that sometimes there are delays if we have an issue that needs to be corrected. However, one thing that is unique, and I believe that we're the only county that with a time of sale that does this, is that we don't require an escrow to be set up if there's a problem solved or found. I mean, that we don't require an escrow and we don't require it to be fixed prior to the sale. So other counties require, yep, this has failed. They require an escrow be set up and they require that repair to happen before the sale. In order to specifically not hold up sales, we don't do that. We feel like it's a negotiation between a buyer and seller at that point. You've been told what the issue is. and what needs to be done. It's between the parties to negotiate how they want to handle that. And then depending on what the issue is, we require it before the new person occupies, so that if there's a problem with a well, you don't have a new homeowner drinking something that needs to be fixed. But it's specifically set up to not hold up sales. And we do have a rush fee too that's available so that they can get it within 24 or 48 hours of application. So if you do, it'd be really helpful to know specifically what barriers they might be running into.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more quick one.
Okay.
You had mentioned you were talking to Phil sometime in the near future, Skaggs.
Yeah, I'm not specifically, but I know there's a work group, I believe Spencer's on it for Friday. I think it's Friday with Eagle and then some local health and Representative Skaggs.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And he was a commissioner in Kent County for 2 or 3 terms. So it'd be interesting to hear his perspective. And honestly, I'd really like to hear how this could impact Kent County. Seems like it would be a fairly tremendous negative impact, but maybe it's less because perhaps they're a little less rural or have different, septic, usage. I don't know, but it would be really interesting to hear the update on that.
Yeah, we can provide that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Just related to legislative update, I believe our next opportunity with our legislative group will be March 15th, I think. If that's right. Okay.
I can get you the updated date on that as soon as I find it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, we'll move to our second opportunity for public comment. Morning.
Morning. My name is Joe Spalding. I'm from Holland Township. Kent County's got none of those point of sale inspections, and they've got the entire Wolverine spill and rural turf to worry about. So I imagine that they could make some improvements on some state funds with that legislation. But again, that depends on whether or not the regulations are put one way or another. I just wanted to talk about farmland preservation. I wanted to talk about the what I'm calling the corrupt bargain that the old school Republicans are making to box y'all out from the GOP here with Karamo and the rest of her faction. The anchor strategy that they have is built around the renewable energy ballot initiative. And they expect that they can lock Trump out of being in Michigan generally for the general election and anchor the ballot because they're not going to have a strong Senate candidate. They're going to anchor their ballot around the anti-renewable energy ballot initiative if it makes it on the ballot. Now, they've already guaranteed and already stepped up to spend lots of money from the same old school DeVos vehicles. And that's another thing that I wanted to bring up. You can detest me locally all you want from the dais. I don't really care. There's nobody in this room that has burned more DeVos money in a furnace than I have. And I've caused them to burn probably tens of millions of dollars, definitely millions of dollars at least, starting with Prop 2. And also, I've definitely caused Ron Weiser to do the exact same thing in Ann Arbor by locking out his corrupt city council members. And they were corrupt in the same way that a lot of city council members across the country are corrupt. They are beholden to landlord interests, and those landlord interests prevent those city council members from increasing the density where there are already services. And what's the result? The result is farmland gets eaten up. And this is stuff that lots of people across the country know if they pay attention to urban planning. They know that higher density where there are already services is the key to stopping that farmland sprawl. And that farmland sprawl is also tied to the renewable energy ballot initiative, because the anti-renewable energy ballot initiative, if it passes, it will allow big oil to take money away from farmers. Right now, farmers are begging, and there's lots of video of it from across the state. Farmers are begging to be able to put renewable energy generation sources on property that they own. And prior to this law that just got passed that's going into effect, townships, unelected zoning boards in townships were locking them out of using property the way that they wanted to generate electricity to save their farms. Now, I love farmland preservation. I think that the best farmland preservation is a successful and profitable farm. And if a farmer decides that renewable energy generation is the way to do that, that's their decision. I don't think that an unelected zoning board should be able to stop that. Now, I've seen all y'all, including Roger Bergman, speak out against the Democratic package of bills on renewable energy. And I think it was a knee-jerk reaction to wind and solar generation. But I implore you to look and talk to these farmers who are asking to put it on their land and realize what a horrible ballot initiative this is going to be if it gets the signatures in.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Karen Obitz, Spring Lake Village. As I often do when I sit here, I listen to different presentations and I'm always so impressed by them and learn so much from them. So today I want to just point out a few things I heard get mentioned in the process of that presentation by Becky Huttinga about the farmland protection presentation that she gave. I noted with interest that she referenced white papers when I didn't see any alarmed looks over here on the part of some of the commissioners on this committee. White papers, of course, being a reference to experts' opinions, research on different items. I didn't see any disapproving or distrustful looks when Huttinga referenced the support of this farmland preservation program or protection program by grant dollars. That seemed to be just fine. And it's also okay for this program to endorse the need for the state to develop even more grant sources to make available even more potential protection of farmland. Yet Chair Moss is on record stating in a previous meeting that he has no qualms sending certain state grant dollars back that support programs he doesn't approve. All I'm really looking for here is some consistency. So I would be listening. I'm going to be listening very carefully to the next meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee, because I'll be curious to see if this board eventually engages in an audit of dollars spent on things like our National Quality Park System and Farmland Preservation Program with the same critical eye as they appear posed to conduct an audit of ARPA fund disbursements. Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment? Good morning.
Hi, Chantal Martineau, Park Township. During the budget discussion or last year, the health department warned that if their budget was cut, that septic inspection would slow down. And now it sounds like your constituents are getting complaints that their budget inspections have slowed down. So if you want to fix that problem, I suggest you restore funding to the health department. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.